The first thing I want to share with you today is yes and really works. Yes and really works. There's a time in our work, and myself included, where we sort of are really committed to yes and really committed. We're at the very beginning of our work, and then we sort of get a little bit more experience, a little bit more loosey-goosey with it. And then ultimately, I think we come back to yes and realize how much yes and works. Like I know a very specific moment to me that like removed all doubt in my mind about how yes and works. I was doing a show and it was quite a few years ago at this point. Myself and Wendy Mullen, I was playing my wife, and I came home from work and I was like, oh, I finally got that promotion. She's like, what'd you do? Did you use voodoo on that guy? And I was like, yes. Yes, I did. And that like transformed that scene, that transformed that whole part of the Herald. I was about to say, no, normalize the scene and be like, nah, I didn't really, whatever. But then I just like said yes, and I did. And then all of a sudden this thing opened up into this really gigantic new world where voodoo was possible. And I was like, that's it. And we even talked about it backstage. She said to me, she's like, I can't believe you just said yes to that and how much it works. I was like, I know, that's crazy, right? And I've been doing improv at it for quite a few years at this point, and it was still so magnetic to me. I was like, that's it, I'm in, I'm committed to this. So I really do think that yes and works. The next thing I learned is that it's all about relationship, whether it's short form or long form or whatever. The scene is always all about relationship. What's happening between these two people that makes this scene happen, right? Because we can have plot all the live long day, but unless we know sort of how these people are relating to each other in the moment, it doesn't really matter to us. We're not going to be as connected to it. As I always tell my students, I'm a person, so I relate to people relating to other people. If I was a premise, then I would relate to premises, right? But I'm not, I'm a person. So whatever we have in the scene, we always try to make it about the relationship. And I use this example all the time because I think it's super clear. If we're on vacation, my wife and I, we're on vacation and suddenly the volcano starts to erupt, that's not just like a plot idea, that's something about us. And she can turn to me and say, great, another vacation. You planned us on another crazy vacation. Yeah. Well, yeah, I did my best. I thought it was really chance of the volcano. So now this says something about me, and this says something about how we relate to each other, right? And that volcano exploding now is about our relationship. And the more we can infuse relationship into everything, the more those scenes are gonna matter. The idea of relationship being at the center of the scene really relates to the next idea, which is my version of how a scene comes into focus. I found this super helpful along the way, right? It helps you sort of decide what to focus on and when. So for me, the scene comes into focus through the relationship first. How are these people relating to each other? Second, what is the label of that, right? And the label is kind of what we get when we ask the audience for a relationship between two people. They'll say doctor-patient or mother-daughter or whatever, right? But that's not really the relationship. That's sort of like the label of who they are to each other, but the relationship is really how they relate to each other. It can be like domineering mother and passive daughter. It can be megalomaniac daughter and confused mother. That's their relationship, right? How they're going to relate to each other. So relationship, and then label kind of who they are to each other, and then the environment, kind of where they are and what they're doing, and then finally the premise, right? I think it starts from the heart and sort of works its way out, and the premise is the last thing that comes into focus because it's these people relating to each other in this way, in this location, or doing this activity, and that leads to this thing that they're gonna do or what the scene is about. Leapfrogging out that last idea of how a scene comes into focus, let's talk about the environment of the scene. I am a firm believer that if you are not using the environment of the scene, you are missing out on half the fun of that scene. Because otherwise, if you're not using the environment, then you're just standing still with your partner and you're just saying funny things at each other, right? Some people call it the 11s or the ones, right? Where you're just like standing there. But if you are in the space alive and working and using things, not only does it give you time to sort of vary up the tempo of the scene because you don't have to talk the whole time, you have to fill the scene with talking because you can fill it with action, right? That's gigantic in itself, but then also gives different ways of expressing your character. Are you like the professor that has a pipe, or are you sort of like the student that's kind of has a backpack? You get to show this physicality because you're in the environment, and the environment isn't just kind of what's out here at arm's distance. The environment starts with what we have on us, like our hand props and our costume and sort of what we're wearing, what's in our pockets, right? All of those things are parts of the environment, and all of those things add depth and meaning to the scene. And you can use those things to make your scene go from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional. Here's another idea that I use all the time. And I think once people hear it, it suddenly becomes a tool for them and they can use it too. So I'll simply share it with you here. Listen, remember, recycle. Listen, remember, recycle. This 3-part process is the way that shows, the really good improv shows have of coming together, of like looking like they're a unity of ideas rather than an ever widening angle of information. The thing sort of like wraps back around to itself. I do the improvised movie solo. And so one way that I keep it looking like one single plot rather than a bunch of different ideas going all different directions is listening, remembering, and recycling. I listen to what my partner's saying. Even if in this case, it happens to be me, I'm my own partner. I listen, I remember the facts that come out, I remember the ideas that we're talking about, and then I recycle. I bring them back later, right? And that gives the piece a sense of unity and wholeness, and that sort of, that really great sort of premeditated kind of look that we love when we're watching a great improv show. We're like, I can't believe they didn't plan that out ahead of time, because these ideas keep coming back and weaving in. And that's simply a function of listening, remembering, and recycling. Here's a super simple idea that people get tripped up on all the time, especially when they're starting out. It's so much better to be obvious. We're sort of afraid of being obvious sometimes, and we get tripped up on this, especially when we're first starting in improv. We want it to be cool and slick. We want to say it kind of offhanded or just sort of hint in the direction of this or that, but it's so much better to be clear. If I just say it out, hey dad, hey sis, hey professor, hey Officer Smith, then there's no confusion about who we are to each other or what's going on in the scene, right? Now, sometimes you get into a scene and you don't do that, and you sort of get to a point where you're confused. What do, right? It is way better to use a clunky moment to clear up any confusion and then move on. For example, I might have to say something like, as your father, it's really important for me to let you know X, Y, or Z. Right? Is that a clunky moment? Yes. But guess what? By paying that price of that clunky moment, suddenly all the confusion of the scene dissipates. And now we know exactly what the dynamic is right here, right? And then we can proceed forward with the scene with surety. We can take big decisive steps because we know what's going on. Another idea that I think about all the time that I use in scenes and I really use when I'm teaching is this idea of scenic inertia. That is, the way that you start is the way that you continue. So I'm a big believer in strong starts to scenes. If I think about what the most important thing in the scenes are, relationship, environment, and activity, I try to get those things out as soon as possible so that we start down that road, we're moving kind of in that road, and the inertia of the scene will keep us going, right? If we don't do that, if we do something else at the beginning of the scene and we get 10, 20, dozens of lines into the scene and then try to add relationship or then try to add environment, it is really hard to steer the ship in that direction. Not impossible, and I think we should, but it's much harder to correct course than start on a good course. And that leads us right into the next idea. It's never too late to make a good decision in a scene, right? Let's say we're halfway through a scene and we realize, oh my gosh, this scene is really off track. Now that sounds like bad news, but that's actually good news because you've woken up, you had that alarm sound of like, oh geez, we're really off track. So now that you know you're off track, you can make a good decision to get you back on track. You can invest in the environment. You can turn to your partner and say, look, as your father, I need to say this, right? And that big decision, that good decision can get the scene on track to end strong and set up the next scene coming down the road. This next thing is a little bit counterintuitive. I want you to be in your head just a little bit as an improviser. Now, so much conversation around improv is how do I get out of my head? How do I get out of my head? How do I get out of my head? Now, in general, you should be out of your head. You should be in the moment with your partner responding back and forth, right? But just like a boxer who's most of the time just responding back and forth with their opponent, there are moments when that boxer has to be in their head and make a strategic choice about what to do next. Same thing as an improviser, right? It's not just this flow that sort of goes wherever, meanders here and there. Sometimes I need to make a choice to move the scene forward this way or that way, or turn, or really respond in a really meaningful way to my partner. And that little sort of higher level consciousness is what I want for you, right? Now, most of the time, as I said, we are in the moment, simply responding back and forth with our partner, but every once in a while, I want you in your head making that bigger overarching strategic choice. This next one is also a bit counterintuitive. You can practice improv alone. When I started off doing improv, I thought that improv was only like with other people. And I would go to my class and do my class for 3 hours and the improv faucet was on. And then at the end of class, it would get turned off. And then I'd be without improv until the next week when I came back to class, improv faucet on, and at the end, turned off. And then I got on a team and I was like, oh my gosh, 3 hours, faucet on for class, faucet off, 3 hours, faucet on for rehearsal, and then off. And so I was 6 hours a week, but I still wanted so much more improv. I really wanted to be a better improviser. So then I found out that the next thing I could do is I could think about improv. In between classes and rehearsals, I could see shows. I could think about the shows that I did. I could think about the class that I had, and I could really think about like, what choices did I make? How did they work? What other choices could I make? So I wasn't just doing improv in class or in rehearsal. I was doing improv all the time, thinking about it, analyzing it, coming up with exercises and techniques to practice by myself. Just like when you are when you play basketball, right? When you play basketball, there are the games, but that's just, you don't learn basketball. You don't practice basketball just during the games, right? You do drills, you do dribbling drills, you do shooting drills, you do mobility drills, all these kinds of things. And there's the same thing for improv. There are techniques that we can use to practice improv while we're alone and train those pillars of improv, those skills that then we can bring into class, then we can bring into rehearsal, then we can bring into shows and try them out and see how our training's gone, right? I practiced free throws, then I come to a game, I do a free throw. Hey, that worked out pretty good. I'm gonna keep practicing that, right? If it doesn't work out, okay, I need to change my training up a little bit. Okay, I made a whole video about solo improv exercises. You can check that out, and that might help you in between those faucet on times of class and rehearsals and shows. There's still plenty that we can do to practice improv. Along the way, I also learned this, which is probably the most important lesson I learned in improv. Always make your partner look good. I know we say it from the very beginning, always make your partner look good, but it is so, so important. If you are lost in an improv scene, or if you're just starting out in improv, focus on making your partner look good. It's gonna save so many of your problems, right? It's gonna save you from so many mistakes. If I'm just focusing on my partner, just making them look good, making whatever they say come to life in this really magnificent way to make whatever they do as their character, oh my gosh, the most amazing thing. If I concentrate on that, I'm gonna solve 90% of my improv problems right out of the gate. One of the first really big game-changing things I learned in improv was assign meaning to everything in the scene. Where someone would say something and you would assign some meaning to that. It's nothing in the improv universe is innocent. It is not without meaning or import or some effect on the scene, right? If we just let information, ideas like wash past us, then we're sort of like really thinning out the scene. But if we add meaning to every single thing that happens in the scene, suddenly that scene takes on such bigger meaning. If someone makes me a ham sandwich, oh, ham, I get it, because I'm a pig. Is that what's happening here? Right? So I'm assigning meaning to that. They just innocently made me a ham sandwich, but I'm assigning some meaning to that deepens our relationship or sets up some sort of dynamic between us. And by doing that, we fill the scene, we energize the scene with ideas and meaning, and that's gonna make the scene so much more fun to do and so much more fun to watch. A lot of times we're told, make a big decision in a scene. I'm gonna add on to that, this big game-changing idea that really made such a difference for me. Make a big decision and then stick to it. Once you make a big decision, you come in with a big character, a big physicality, or a big voice, or a big action of some sort, right? Commit to that and keep doing that. Listen, remember, recycle that idea over and over again to keep it energized and alive. A lot of times we'll come in with a big character and then we just kind of lose focus on it and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until you're just basically yourself by the end of the scene, right? You're making a promise to the audience with this big choice at the beginning, then stick to it and keep delivering on that promise throughout the whole scene. And that idea, that clarity, that commitment to that big choice is gonna change the direction of the scene for the better, because it's gonna exist in this bigger universe, this bigger than normal universe. If we don't do that, if we don't commit to that, it's just gonna keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just normal and just two people, pedestrian talking in this way, right? So once you make that big choice, stick with it. Here is another game-changing idea that I use in my work to this very day. Have whatever you need to make the scene happen. Make sure that you have whatever you need to make the scene happen. For example, let's say we're in a scene and I say, hey, I'd really like to take you on a date. And you say yes. Now, if I don't have the stuff that I need for that date, suddenly this scene is a prologue for another scene that is the date, right? That's really the action. That's really the exciting part. But what if I had what I needed? I say, hey, I'd really like to take you on a date. You say yes. And then I open a cupboard, or I pull off my backpack, or I pull this curtain aside, and I have everything I need to make that date happen right now. Something we're in the action, right? And the action stays with us in this very moment. You can always reach out and grab whatever you need from the improv universe. It is full of whatever you need to make that scene happen. Now let's talk about a few bigger ideas. First of all, you should do as many different kinds of improv as you can, right? If you're doing short form, try long form. If you're doing comedy, try drama. If you're doing heralds, try musicals. Every different way that you can use these basic tools of improv makes you a better improviser. If you learn how to use yes and in drama and comedy, short form and long form, narrative and sort of non-narrative alike, you will become a better improviser. And then every situation you're in, you bring these new experiences, you bring these new ways of using these basic tools of improv to that scene, and it will be a better scene for it. Take a risk. In your improv scenes, take a risk. If you're sitting back and you're thinking, should I do this? Should I try this? Yes, do it. Try it. That's how you discover new things, right? You're gonna get out there and you're either gonna win or you're gonna learn something, right? And both are worthwhile. And if you're not risking, if you're only playing it safe, only doing the things that you know are gonna work, only doing the things that you know are safe, only doing the things that you know, are the things that the audience loves, then you're really gonna be like shrinking your work to just a bag of tricks, things that you know work every time. To really make those discoveries, to really get into the zone of magic in improv, you need to be taking risks. Here's something that was really hard for me to learn, but ended up really benefiting my work and also the work of my students. And that is, don't try to solve the scene. If there's a problem in the scene, let the problem exist. Play the problem, right? I always think of the odd couple. One guy's neat and one guy's sloppy, but they don't try to make each other the opposite thing. The sloppy guy doesn't try to make the neat guy sloppy. The neat guy doesn't try to make the sloppy guy neat, right? They may try, but it never works. We're not trying to solve the scene. We're trying to play that situation. We're trying to play that relationship between those two characters. Don't solve the problem. Don't solve the scene, play the problem. When you first start improvising and you first start doing shows, you're gonna do, let's say, one show that's good and one show that's bad. Now that's gonna look like half of the shows you've done are bad. But as you keep doing shows, that fraction is gonna change, and each individual show is gonna count less and less towards that big tally of shows, right? Because it's like 1 out of 1,000 shows, or 1 out of 10,000, or 100,000 shows. Each one counts a little bit less. And this is important for you because, it takes the pressure off of those shows. It's what I call the fraction of life theory. When we're young, everything matters so much to us because it's such a bigger fraction of our life. But as we grow and our life gets so much bigger, then everything that happens becomes a smaller and smaller fraction, right? Same thing with the amount of improv shows you do. As you do more and more shows, each one counts a little bit less. It takes the pressure off. It makes the whole thing way more fun. As you do those more and more shows, you're gonna find that you come to a time where your work sort of plateaus out and flattens. You struggle a little bit, right? You feel like, oh, I've been improving, and now suddenly it's flat. That's okay. That's all part of the process, right? You need to keep working through that plateau or through that dip to get to the other side of it. And then you're suddenly gonna have this explosive growth again. And then it's gonna plateau again. And then it's gonna be growth again. And then you're gonna plateau again. That's all part of the process. You just have to stick with it, keep drawing in some new influences, keep trying different things in your work, and you will get through that. I promise. Here's something that is sometimes controversial, but I really, really believe it. You cannot use the audience as the final metric of whether a show is good or not. I'll say it one more time. You cannot use the audience as the final metric of whether a show is good or not, right? You have to do the work that you set out to do. Think about a play, right? In a play, they rehearse the play and then they perform the play and they do their best version of it, the best thing that they can. The audience has come to see this play and they're ready to take it in and see what it is, and they may like it or they may not like it. But we can't change the play just because of how the audience is reacting, right? We need to do our best version of what we've practiced, what we've learned, the things that we've put together. Same thing in improv. We're gonna learn how to do a herald, and we're gonna do it this way. We're gonna bring these things to it, right? And then we are then our own metric. Did we achieve the goals that we set out to achieve? Did we do the things that we set out to do with improv? Did we do good improv? Then, also, did the audience enjoy it? Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. right? I've done terrible shows that the audience has really loved. I've done shows that I've been super proud of that the audience was silent as the grave, right? But we have to really have that internal compass of, we're going to do this work. We're going to set out to achieve this thing. We're going to sort of go after these goals and these ideas, and we're going to sort of make the work, and then we're going to share it with the audience. And they either come up to us and love it or not. And that's okay, right? We are doing the work that we set out to do. Improv has a problem. It's different every time. And that's what makes it exciting. That's what makes it great. But that's one of the reasons I think it's struggled on the global stage. Let's say you go to a music concert, right? And you hear a song. You can listen to that song later in your earbuds or in your car, or maybe you go to another concert and see that song again, right? It is this replicable piece of art, right? And we can hold it in digital or on a CD or on a record or whatever, and it's there, right? Same thing with stand-up comedy. You can go see a stand-up. They may have a different set, but they have these jokes that are little pieces, almost like songs that you could hear on an album, that you can hear like on a CD or in Apple Music or whatever, right? But improv doesn't have that. It's different every single time. So my advice to improvisers moving forward, and I've thought a ton about this, is put your improv online. Put it on YouTube, put it on Instagram, put it on TikTok, wherever it'll go, put it out there. And then as you do, you're freezing these moments in time, and then they sort of exist as these artifacts. And I think that gives improv this sort of new staying power, this new sort of vitality and sort of long lifespan that it didn't have before. It used to be that improv was only this sort of like you had to be there kind of art form, right? And in its basic core, it is. In its basic DNA, it is still that. But we can share it on a larger stage by capturing and freezing these moments in time, and people can check them out, and people can learn about your work, and people can see what you're doing, and then they can come to that live show. And here's the biggest thing I learned doing improv. If you let it, improv will change your life for the better. I've made some of my best friends doing improv. I met my wife doing improv. I am a better listener because of improv. I'm more creative because of improv. Improv 100% changed the trajectory of my life, and I wouldn't change a moment of it. Thanks for watching. I've put all these ideas together in a PDF that you can download and peruse at your leisure, so you don't have to keep coming back to this video. That link is down below. I've also put together this small playlist of videos I think will add a lot of detail to things we talked about today. In the meantime, have fun and make your partner look good.